Directors of Steinbach Chamber of Commerce. Welcome here, everybody. Welcome, candidates. Thank you so much for being here and participating and being willing to speak to the public and share your points of view. We have some questions prepared here that will be read. There will be a 2-minute opening statement from each of you, and then a 3-minute closing statement at the end. The order of the candidates has been randomly selected, so the opening statements will happen in an order, and then we'll do the reverse for the closing statements, just to kind of keep it all super slick. The answers ideally are kept to about a 2-minute time limit, and then Frida's here on the bell. She'll give you a little ding about 10 seconds before your 2-minute time is up, so you'll have a little bit of time to close out your comments. The one last thing that I want to cover before I jump off the stage, in an orderly, safe fashion, is to remember to silence your phones or devices or whatever you have with you, so that you aren't the one that is awkwardly having your phone go off and everybody's looking at you while you're trying to quickly silence that phone and it's playing. Okay, that's enough for me. What you're really here for is to hear the candidates. Enjoy the show.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you very much, Tim. As he mentioned, that there was a random draw just a short while ago that the Chamber of Commerce conducted, and this is the order of opening statements and then the reverse for closing statements. So the opening statement will be our Liberal candidate, Trevor Kirchenoff, followed by Conservative Ted Faulk, then the People's Party, Wayne Sturby, and then Janine Gibson of the Green Party. So we'll go in that order to open, and 2-minute opening statements, and then reverse order for the closing statements. So Trevor, to you.
Thank you so much. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for being here today. I would like to begin by acknowledging that we are gathered here on Treaty 1 territory, and that Provencher riding is also situated in part on Treaty 3 territory. This is the traditional land of the Anishinaabe and Ojibwe Chippewa peoples, and also the traditional homeland of the Métis First Nation. Thank you to the Chamber of Commerce for hosting this event. The Chamber of Commerce plays such an important role in our communities here. Businesses in the Chamber create jobs and bring in workers, and Provencher is an energized riding that is open for business. The Eastman Immigrant Services resettles from 18 to 30 new arrivals per month. So thank you to you all for doing this important work every day. I also want to thank the constituents who have taken time to share with me over the course of this campaign. I've heard incredible stories. I've accepted invitations to farms and businesses. I spoke at a school in Steinbach where the children asked amazing questions. Constituents have shared deeply personal stories with me. A parent whose 3-year-old has prescription drug costs in the thousands. A constituent who is afraid that their ability to make choices about reproductive health could be taken from them under a conservative government. Constituents who want us to continue investing in infrastructure. I appreciate hearing these stories firsthand. These stories give me an understanding on a deeper level. This is something that we could all read about, but those personal stories and anecdotes and meeting people in person is something that I appreciate, and I believe being a politician always must start with listening.
Thank you, Trevor. Ted Faulk.
Good evening. Let me start by thanking each of you for coming here this evening and listening to us candidates present our pitches and our positions. I'm grateful to the Steinbach Chamber of Commerce for their role in putting this forum together. Thank you for your efforts. I'd like to take this opportunity to tell you a little bit about myself. I've lived here in Provencher for the past 44 years. I'm married to my wonderful wife, Irene, of 38 years. Together, we have 3 adult children and 10 grandchildren. I was first given the honor to serve as your Member of Parliament in 2013, and I was re-elected again in 2015. I love representing the Southeast Manitoba as your Member of Parliament. Our communities are recognized for their generosity, their ingenuity, and their strong work ethic. You're also very encouraging to me in my role as a parliamentarian. I'm often humbled by the kind of notes that I receive from folks all across our riding, whether just to say thank you for the job you're doing, we're thinking of you, or that we're praying for you. Those are all very meaningful to me and my wife, and we appreciate all the care and concern that has been expressed to us. As your MP, I have served on several parliamentary committees, including Public Safety, National Security. I was Vice Chair of Justice and Human Rights, and most recently, I've sat on the Standing Committee of Natural Resources and also served as the Deputy Shadow Minister for Employment, Workforce Development, and Labor. I've been active in our community in a variety of capacities. I co-own a small construction company and heavy construction and gravel company here in the Steinbach area. I've served on the Steinbach Credit Union Board for 24 years, 16 of those as the president and board chair. And I've also served on numerous industry, church, and community committees. I'm running for re-election because I want to make sure that we leave Canada better off for our children and our grandchildren. I'm running as part of a conservative team that is focused on helping you and your family get ahead. I look forward to having a great discussion here this evening. Thank you.
Thanks, Ted. Wayne Sturby of the People's Party.
Well, good evening, everyone, and I want to express my thanks to the Chamber of Commerce as well for holding this event, and thank you to each one of you who took the time to come out. My name is Wayne Sturby. I'm the People's Party of Canada candidate. I live in the town of Lorette, so I'm part of this constituency. I have been passionate about politics just about my entire life. I can go back all the way to when I was in grade 6 and grade 7 and having conversations and debates with classmates. And I really learned that from my parents. Tonight, my grandson is here, my eldest grandson. There's not too many people who are 12 years old who would actually take the time to watch the federal leaders debate, but he did that during the last election. Mattis and I have some really, really interesting conversations about politics, but it's good to have him here. It's good to see a contingent of young people, because tonight we're talking about Canada. We're talking about the future of Canada, your future. Right now, I'm a corrections officer. I've been doing that for almost 10 years. I'm an officer at Headingley. And one thing that I discovered during my time there, see, when I first went to work as a corrections officer, I had no idea what that term even meant, what kind of work I would be involved in. But one thing became very, very clear to me as I got to know inmates and interacted with them on a daily basis, had very, very significant conversations with them. And the thing that I discovered is that if you do not have a good foundation for your life, you are headed for disaster, you're headed for chaos. Our country, my country, Canada, the land, what we call our home and native land, was built on a sure foundation. And that foundation is under attack right now. Now, I know that Provencher and especially Steinbach, there are people who take their faith and they take their politics very, very seriously.
Very good. Thank you. I'm sure you will get to continue in your closing statements, Wayne. Thank you. Janine Gibson of the Green Party.
Good evening. Thank you very much for coming. I'm very grateful to the Steinbach Chamber of Commerce and all the people that contributed to this, especially because I think participating in our democracy is a very important thing at this time in history when there is so much possibility and so much risk in front of us. I support Elizabeth May and the Green Party policies because I've seen how they work in my own life. To follow Ted's lead and talk a little bit about myself, I came from a family that was stricken with mental illness and addiction. And just by chance, after my family broke apart, the address I was staying in Winnipeg was chosen to be part of the Guaranteed Annual Income program that ran in Manitoba. And that basic guarantee of a certain amount of living income allowed me to work part-time as a waitress and finish my education, finish my high school, school, go to university. And I have been pleased and honored to work in my own business for 26 years now, self-employed. So I very much support small business, but support the important policies of the Green Party in assuring that families have what they need. Our approach to social justice is based on fiscally responsible balancing budgets that would take money away from subsidies to oil companies that amount to $1,600 per person per year, every year for every Canadian. And with that money, we can make education free so that people who want to learn can develop their abilities to the best and be able to make contributions like the hardworking people that I have come to know living almost my entire life here in Provencher. I grew up as a girl just outside of Oak Bank when that part was still part of Provencher. I've watched our beautiful Provencher grow, and I believe the Green Party can really help the families address health issues and be healthier. Thank you.
Thank you, Janine. The questions have been prepared by the Chamber of Commerce, and we'll continue cycling in order. So the first answer this time will go to Ted, then followed by Wayne, by Wayne, then Janine, and then Trevor. So, and then we'll continue cycling through, taking turns who gets first and last answers. So question number one to you, Ted. If elected, how would your party, and you in particular, support economic development initiatives as well as private government partnerships with the Provencher riding?
As a small business owner in this community, it's important that we support our small business community. We know from statistics that 70% of people are employed in a small business. We know how important that is to our communities all throughout Provencher. Our government is committed to supporting small businesses. We began reducing the tax rate on small businesses 4 years ago, and we've seen that rate now drop to 9%. In addition to that, we want to continue to support small businesses with providing them with the necessary tools to get employees and provide the funding that they need to embark on green initiatives to make their companies more prosperous and also look after the environment at the same time.
Thank you, Ted. Wayne.
Well, let me begin by simply saying that I'm really getting fed up with the way that other political parties label their opponents. I've been a conservative most of my life. This is the first time I'm actually running or supporting a non-conservative party. But I get really frustrated and angry when I hear whether it's the Liberals, the NDP, the Greens, saying that the Conservative Party favors the rich. They're the party of big business. I mean, it's just hyperbole, and it's after a while it just starts to sound really, really stupid. And that's maybe one thing about politics that needs to be fixed. Why can't we have just honest debate? Talk about the issues. You can disagree if you want to. You're free to disagree, but to just be labeling people all the time is absolutely stupid and accomplishes nothing. Now, like Ted, I've been involved in small business. I was in the trucking business for almost 20 years, and we went through some good times, went through some bad times. But the one thing that the PPC party strongly embraces is free market principles, and that's one of the reasons why we're opposed to the supply management system. That's maybe a topic that'll come up. But the one thing that we need to do is we need to get government out of the places of business. We are so overly regulated. When I was in the trucking business, it was hard then, but what I have seen now is absolutely frightening to me. There's no way that I would ever want to open a trucking business again, whether it's the provincial regulations or the federal regulations. Canada was built upon the principles of freedom. And what we need to make sure that we do nothing to take away our free markets and the rights of people. Thank you.
Thank you, Wayne. Again, you get a 10-minute advice. Or 10 seconds to wrap up, just so you know when the first bell goes. To Janine.
I believe that the green policies that support a shift to a green economy will will really assist in training people so that the economics of retrofitting buildings, ensuring that our homes are better insulated, that our energy dollars go as far as they can, that we're able to share our wonderful electricity with our neighbors to the east, that the electricity that we now send south, we could send across the borders, and that would continue to generate jobs in that area. I think this is an opportunity for a lot of job creation to continue to build on addressing these intense weather events through prevention, through directing our resources to investments in our community. Municipalities need assistance in preventing flooding, in designing water retention areas, preserving wetlands, and I believe the kind of jobs, those kinds of jobs, helping foresters shift from cutting trees to planting trees will both add economic development in Provencher, continue to celebrate the wonderful resources we have here without the risk of fracking sand and the silicosis that causes. So many diseases that challenge our health system could be prevented by being more resilient in the way we manage our resources. So I really think that by investing in a shift to a greener economy, we can both increase our health economically as well as our health personally and the health of the environment. And all of these green policies that I'm speaking to have been costed by the Parliamentary Budgetary Committee and are doable. They're all in Mission Green. Please do read them.
Thank you. Trevor.
The Liberal Party believes in supporting small businesses. We cut the small business tax rate from 11% to 9%, and we're going to do more to support small businesses. Like the Conservatives, we do have a plan to encourage homeowners to retrofit their homes to become more energy efficient. And this is also in the Green Party plan. But we have a different way of doing it, a different approach that I think will be very good for small businesses around Provencher. And that is to offer $40,000 interest-free loans for homeowners retrofitting their homes. And the difference, the fundamental difference here is that in the Conservative plan, you have to have that money already to take advantage of a tax credit that you can get back for making those improvements. And under the Liberal plan, we're planning to make that money more available to homeowners. And that is going to be huge for businesses. It will affect so many different kinds of businesses associated with construction. Another key aspect of the Liberal Party platform is to continue supporting immigration. In 2018, Canadian farmers lost $2.9 billion due to a lack of labor. So if we continue supporting immigration and can help to fill some of those vacant jobs, that will do a lot for business in our area. And another important part of the Liberal Party platform that will help small businesses is pharmacare. Currently, businesses are paying for prescription drug benefits when they can, and to have a national pharmacare program will remove some of that cost from employers. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes the answers to question one. We'll now move on to our second question, which deals with immigration. And this time, Wayne Sturby will take the lead with the first answer, and then we'll follow from Wayne to Janine to Trevor and Ted. As immigration has been a huge contributor to our economic success and diversity in the region, what changes, initiatives, or policies would your party implement to support immigration going forward?
Well, thank you for the question. The PPC party recognizes the benefit that immigrants bring to our country. Our country was founded on immigrants coming here. Although there was a big difference between the 1800s and the early 1900s, when we had people arriving from Europe and from Asia and from Africa and so on. Back then, the people who came here, they came to build a nation. They came to settle the land. They came to make a home. They came to unite behind a central idea of what Canada was going to become. And they worked very, very hard to make sure that Canada became that. It became their home. The PPC party is not anti-immigrant as we have been portrayed by our opponents. And again, we come into the area of hyperbole, which really doesn't accomplish anything. The PPC party wants to have a sensible immigration policy. We want to make sure that those people who are coming are not coming simply to take advantage of the hardworking Canadians, that they're not coming here just simply to get a free ride. And we want to make sure too that we don't have this open door policy where we're not prepared to find out exactly who's coming across our borders and for what reason. It only makes sense. Now, Canadians have always been generous. They've always been compassionate. If I were to have the chance to sit and talk to any one of you, I am quite sure that that we would have a great conversation about those very, very same ideals. But at the same time, we don't throw caution to the wind. We all have doors. We all have fences. We want to make sure that our homes are a place of refuge for our families first. And that's all we're asking to make sure that Canada is.
Thank you, Wayne. Janine.
Thank you. The Green Party believes, especially relevant to our area here in Provencher with such a strong agricultural sector, that we should be identifying people who are applying to immigrate, identifying those with skills and interests in agriculture earlier on in the process so that they can be placed, or planning can be made to even more effectively place them in communities where their skills can be developed and integrated into the kind of agricultural production that's happening in that particular region. So it's too late on in the process when those who are interested, or I've spoken with refugees and immigrants who found it difficult, many who appreciate the opportunity, but found it difficult to get into agriculture. And I think that the structure of placement and supports could be improved so that they are more easily made that integration is more easily made. Another issue that has come to my attention from immigrant communities are mental health supports. There's a lot of trauma in the world, and there are a lot of people coming and able to work, but still dealing with residual trauma. I believe, as the Green Party does, that addictions issues should be seen as mental health issues and not as criminal issues, and that there needs to be far more support. It's 1 in 5 Canadians will have a direct experience with some sort of mental illness in their lifetime. And I'm sure many people in this room, like many of their families, your families are like my own, that have been touched by this. And not everyone has equal access to the kinds of supports and preventative supports that need to be as available to our immigrants as they are to all Canadians. And that's not always the case. So I believe those are very important supports that could facilitate the integration and the effective role that immigrants play in developing our economy and our communities. Thank you.
Thanks, Janine. Trevor?
Great question. So I mentioned this number before in my previous answer, but it's so huge and so dramatic, it's worth saying again. Canadian farmers lost $2.9 billion in 2018 due to a lack of labor. So yes, immigration is very important to help fill those gaps. And the Liberal Party believes in a modest increase in immigration numbers to help with this problem. I would like to add that refugees have already been starting to help fill the farm labor gap in some rural areas. There are some programs in place that have been beginning to work with this. Canada can not only afford to assist refugees, refugees are also assisting Canada. Mm-hmm. I think it's important to address what Wayne has said. We do not have an open door policy of just letting anybody in the country. What Canada has is a legal responsibility to assist asylum seekers. And when someone comes across the border, proper protocol is followed. Our immigration officers and RCMP do an amazing job keeping both asylum seekers and Canadians already living in Canada safe. And when I was door knocking in Emerson, in the town that made international news a few years back because of people crossing the border, no one brought up any safety concerns about refugees coming into the country, not a single person. And when I asked people about it, the response I got was that it was laughable that this was turned into this huge, dramatic international issue. So I believe we need to continue supporting immigration and continue supporting refugees that need our help. Thank you.
Thanks, Trevor. Ted.
A Conservative Party absolutely believes in immigration. We realize and recognize how vital it is to the continued growth of the economy here in Canada. But what we do believe is that an immigration system needs to be legal, it needs to be fair, and it needs to be compassionate. And I want to address all three of those things. You know, we've seen an influx of illegal migrants coming across our borders from the United States. We have to date over 45,000 people that have entered our country illegally at a cost of $1.6 billion to the federal government. And these costs are being borne by our government. There's money that could have been redirected to social programs, to our seniors, to other initiatives, could have been used to actually balance the budget. And instead we're spending $1.6. We're giving them healthcare and dental and living allowances that are much more generous than our Canadians get. And so that's something that our leader has committed to, closing that gap and that loophole in the Safe Third Country Agreement. And people that want to come here need to do it the legal way. There's streams where people can enter our country, they can apply. And in fact, in my office, I have I have a person designated strictly for immigration and citizenship issues. And that individual is busy. And we meet, we've unified hundreds of people over the course of the last 6 years for family reunification. And we recognize how important immigration is to our country, but it needs to be legal, it needs to be fair. And when our system is clogged up with illegal migrants, that doesn't allow our bureaucrats to process people that are languishing in refugee camps in war-torn countries that need the generosity of this country to relocate, to make a fresh start in life. We have a compassionate component to our immigration system. We'll continue to do that as Conservatives. We'll make sure there's room for people that need a place to make a new start and call Canada their home.
Thank you, Ted.
Thank you, Tim.
Our third question deals with small business. Janine, you'll take the lead on this one, followed then by Trevor and Ted and Wayne. Small business drives our local economy. Most people in the area are employed by a small business. What will you do to ensure that small businesses are able to thrive in our communities?
Thank you. I think one of the most important aspects of supporting small business is to look at what we choose to tax in our structure as we currently experience it. And I don't understand why we tax labor. It almost seems that we tax labor because the vast majority of the middle class, that's the one thing they have. We don't really tax the 1%, the high wealth, but we have income taxes, and that's taxing labor. So what the Green Party purports is that we shift our taxing away from taxing labor, which would directly support small business, and tax pollution. And when we tax the large-scale polluters, that money is going to be redistributed into the education and the support for a greener economy that would directly support small businesses, small construction, in retrofitting community centers and homes all across Provencher, all across Canada. The support for small businesses, I'm not at all surprised that small business supports what was it, over 70% of workers work in small businesses. And so when we change that tax structure away from taxing our labor and taxing to taxing pollution. It frees up small business and individuals to start their own business. It took me 3 years to pay for the investment in my business that I had to invest to get it going. And fortunately, I've chosen simple living. I've lived off grid for the last 35 years, just solar and wind. I take meditation in hauling wood and water. To me, I live simply so that others may simply live. But I've been able to start a business and thrive, support my children who are doing very well, my grandchildren. And so I know from firsthand how important small businesses are. Thank you.
Thanks, Janine. Trevor.
Thank you for the question. We are already doing really well with supporting small businesses. The Liberal Party cut the small business tax rate from 11% to 9%. And unemployment under the Liberal Party has been the lowest that it's been in the last 40 years, which is really amazing. There's a lot more that we can do to support small businesses, especially in rural areas. And I think internet is a big one. Internet is not a luxury in rural areas. Small businesses need access to high-speed internet. And that is something that we have been investing in. We've been making investments in infrastructure. Infrastructure is one of the big items that the Conservative Party says it wants to cut and to slow down spending on infrastructure. And I think that should be a huge concern to small businesses around Provencher. As well, one thing that I mentioned earlier is $40,000 interest-free loans to homeowners wanting to make their homes more energy efficient. This will benefit so many different kinds of small businesses. And again, being in this structure of an interest-free loan, the money will be so much more accessible than under Conservative Party plans, where you need to have that money first and spend it, and then you could get a tax credit back. So this is a major difference between the Liberal plan and the Conservative plan for supporting growth in the economy, for supporting small businesses.
Thank you, Trevor. Ted.
Thank you.
Well, as you know, I said before, small business employs 70% of Canadians. If you were Justin Trudeau, you would be referring to small business owners as tax cheats. That's what the Liberal Party thinks of small business. They call them tax cheats. And they went after them aggressively from a tax perspective. They followed our lead by reducing the small business tax rate from 11 to 9%. We're going to get rid of the carbon tax, which we know is a detriment to all small businesses. Doesn't help. We know that small businesses provide employment. We're going to make sure there's a steady stream of skilled workers that small businesses can rely on. And we're going to support education. We're going to support our Red Seal training program so that when workers are required by small businesses, they'll be trained and they'll be ready to go. But we will not attack small businesses the way the Liberals have attacked them. We won't go after the passive income in a small business and tax that at 73% as the Liberals have done. The Liberals also tried to tax employee health and dental benefits that small business owners provide their employees. The Liberals had even floated the idea of taxing employee benefits that small business owners provide to their employees. So a minimum wage waitress trying to make a few extra dollars to support her education or support her family with some extra income, that free meal that she gets in the restaurant in the middle or at the end of her shift, the Liberals wanted to tax that. And that's what they think of small businesses. They think they're tax cheats, and they're going to go after them, or they're going to continue to go after them, and they're going to be looking after their big corporate buddies with $12 million bailouts for refrigerators for the second wealthiest family in Canada, the Weston family. And that's what Liberals do.
Thank you, Ted. Wayne.
Well, small business really is the engine that drives our Canadian economy. And so small business is something that has to be supported and encouraged. As I said earlier in some of my remarks, one of the biggest things that that small business has to contend with is government continually trying to regulate, government interference, government intrusion. Now, I've been like you. I have hated the idea of a carbon tax ever since they started talking about it. I wish that I could have confidence in what Ted said with Andrew Scheer and his policies, because Andrew Scheer has kind of been all over the place on that. I just simply don't have confidence that the Conservative Party will truly eliminate the carbon tax. They'll rebrand it. They'll just call it something else, but it's going to be the same thing. The PPC believes strongly in provincial rights. We remember, I'm sure many of you remember, when Pierre Elliott Trudeau was the Prime Minister of this country, and how he centralized power, took powers that were guaranteed to the provinces away from the provinces and put them in Ottawa. The PPC party is fully committed to making sure that the provinces have jurisdiction over these things. The federal government has absolutely no place in small business enterprises, because we do business in the provinces, in the cities, in the communities, in the municipalities. Why do we need to have Ottawa regulating that? I agree with some of the things that the Green Party candidate said about taxing labor. The People's Party of Canada has by far the best taxation policy for all Canadians.
Thank you, Wayne. Question 4 will deal with the environment, and Trevor, you'll take the lead on this, followed by Ted and Wayne and Janine. There seems to be growing concern about the environment. How does the carbon tax address this issue? What is your approach on addressing environmental concerns and Canada's role in mitigating climate change?
Yes, so clearly we need to talk about the carbon tax. This is a great question. Okay, so for one thing, that the carbon tax affects so many things that we buy. What this shows us is how incredibly dependent we are on pollution, on creating pollution in just about every decision that we make all the time. Now, the carbon tax works in changing behavior, and it is not a significant drain on the economy. How do I know this? Because BC, listen to this, you've got to understand. I'm actually really excited about it. BC has had the carbon tax for many more years than Canada has federally, and it's worked. Carbon emissions in BC have leveled out, while the BC population has continued to grow. BC's economy has continued to boom. So, I mean, the numbers are telling us that this is a solution that works. It's also a Nobel Prize winning solution. It changes behavior, but it is revenue neutral. Well, how does that work? Let's take an example. Say you're going to the grocery store and somebody gives you $5 when you get to the store. Now, that is like when we all got money back before the carbon tax even went into effect. We got money back on our taxes. We got a rebate. So somebody gives you $5 when you walk into the grocery store. And now you walk in and you're trying to buy cheese, and you try to decide, am I going to get my New Bothwell local cheese, or am I going to buy some Quebec cheese? And in the pricing on the cheese, you can see the carbon tax is affecting the cheese that's being shipped in. Now, I have that extra $5 and I can deal with the difference in price, and I'm still receiving that price signal as a consumer, and that's how I'm going to make my decision. This is why the carbon tax works. It affects behavior.
Thanks, Trevor. Ted?
The very first thing that a conservative government will do is scrap the carbon tax. You know, liberals haven't seen a tax they don't like. It's just like our liberal colleague said here, loves the carbon tax, could hardly wait to talk about it. He'll talk about any tax because liberals like to tax. And they tax to fuel their reckless spending. And they'll continue to do that. Liberals believe in big government, big business, big tax, because they got big spending habits. A conservative government does not believe in big taxes. We believe in leaving money in your pockets because we believe you know best what to do with your money. What's the conservative plan to carbon tax? Axe it. What is our environmental plan? It's a three-prong approach. First of all, we're going to promote technology, not taxes. We are going to incentivize people to use green technologies, to become better stewards of the environment, and offer greener technologies that will keep our environment cleaner. And then we're going to reintroduce funding for our grasslands and wetlands, which the Liberals axed, by the way. And we're going to make sure that our pristine natural forests, our wetlands, our natural habitat for wildlife is preserved. And then we're going to take that technology that we develop here in Canada and we're going to share it globally because, you know, in Canada, we produce 1.6% roughly of carbon emissions in the world. So we're not the big carbon emitters. And by the way, this Liberal carbon tax scheme, they give their big corporate buddies a 90% exemption. The big corporate companies don't pay that. You know, they're so hypocritical on that. I can't even believe what I hear. But we are going to export our technology around the world because we know that the big polluters are countries like China and India, and they need help and encouragement in adopting green technology.
Thanks, Ted. Wayne.
Our Green Party policies are based on science. They're based on research. They're a Nobel Prize winning technique that does change behavior and has changed behavior is met with fear here in Manitoba because we're not taking full advantage of the electrical resources we have. With a shift to electric vehicles, electric farm vehicles, electric transportation, we can support local and have more jobs and production locally by putting in place a pollution tax. So think of it that way, is we're shifting behavior which needs to change. We need to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions to only 1.5% of 2005 levels. That is an acknowledged fact that we need to address this. This is a climate crisis, and I strongly support the green approach, which is this should be a bipartisan issue. We need people from all parties to sit down and plan how we are going to make changes in Canada and support the shift to electric so that you don't experience the pollution tax as a net benefit. There's a lot of fear that it's going to be negative, but it can be completely cost neutral, and in the green plan can actually support increased production locally, increased ability to transport. Look at our terrible bus system now. You know, we are not addressing the needs of all our communities in how people move around. By taking greater advantage of our electrical resources here in Manitoba, by putting into place these green policies, we can address and meet our climate commitments and ensure that we do not have more of these extreme weather events.
Thanks, Janine. Wayne?
Well, climate and the environment have always been hot topic issues, whether it's provincial or federal, and whether it's 60s, 70s, 80s, or whenever, it's always been a topic of hot conversation. I ran as a candidate in the provincial election in 2016. I ran in the constituency of Wolseley. And of course, Wolseley is a very environmentally sensitive kind of a riding. And this question came up there too. And the thing that bothered me was how the other parties tried to paint the others as somehow being less responsible than they were. The Green Party, the Liberal Party, they wanted to trumpet themselves as being the party of the environment, as though, if you belong to the Conservative Party, if you belong to the People's Party of Canada, that somehow you don't care about the environment. Now, I was born in the 50s, grew up in the 60s and the 70s, and I remember how thick the air used to be when we kind of were a little bit careless about things. And I remember how the promises were made that by the 1980s, we were going to clean this up. That was the atmosphere, and was also the rivers. We have done a tremendous job collectively. This is not one party. This is not one group of people doing it and showing responsibility. This is all of us together. There isn't a single person that isn't concerned about the environment, whether it's for ourselves, for our children, or for our grandchildren. Now, the thing that bothers me, though, is the hyperbole and the crazy kind of language. I printed off something here going back all the way to 1895. It's 3 pages, and how in almost every year there was some kind of a global climate alarmist telling us we're either heading for an ice age, we're heading for oceans rising. New York, Miami, and all the coastal cities are going to be destroyed underwater, including Tokyo. Now, let me just read you here something that really sounds stupid. This is from the IPCC. The overall risks of climate change impacts can be reduced by limiting the rate and magnitude of climate change. Now, that is such circular reasoning. I'm sorry, thank you.
Thank you, Wayne. Next topic deals with Provencher's diverse workforce. And Ted, you will take the lead on this one, followed by Wayne, Janine, and Trevor. If elected, what policies or platforms would you put forward to enhance Provencher's diverse workforce and vibrant economy?
Well, the question is very accurate because Provencher does have a very vibrant economy, and workforce is always an ongoing issue. We've seen that issue addressed over the years by different governments through temporary foreign workers and through immigration. I think immigration is one of the wonderful ways to address that. And I think we talked about that a little earlier, but Conservatives support a robust immigration policy that allows people to come here legally, fairly, and compassionately. And I believe there's also opportunity for an economic stream. In the Southeast here, we have seen a lot of immigration, and we've seen these people integrate into our communities. We've seen them start businesses, we've seen them buy businesses, and we've seen them be successful here. And we want to continue to see that happen. And they are certainly participating in the economic growth of our community. From an employment standard, we support the Red Seal Trades Program. Part of my responsibilities this last year in Parliament was as Deputy Shadow Minister for Employment, Workforce Development and Labour. I attended a conference in Vancouver called Supporting Women in the Trades. And I met with many different stakeholder groups there about what are the barriers for women entering the trades, what can we as a government do to assist in that. I met with different trades unions, I met with construction associations, and we talked about having diversity in the trades because there are women that really want to be involved in the trades. It's lucrative to work in the trades, and women want to participate in that more and more. And so I gave examples. I gave example in my own company where we have a diversity of equipment operators and truck drivers that are, and as well as in our office that are both men and women. And one principle that we very, very strongly believe in is equal pay for equal work, regardless of whether you're a man or a woman or what task that you perform.
Thank you, Ted. Wayne?
Yes, that's great. The Green Party certainly does support as well. equal pay.
Janine, sorry, it's Wayne's
Oh,
turn
I'm
here.
sorry, I thought it was, you said Janine.
Well, as I said earlier, I've been working at Headingley Correctional for almost 10 years, and it's probably one of the most diverse workplaces that you could ever hope to see. People from Asia, people from Africa, people from the Middle East, people from Europe, and various age groups, male, female. So it's a very, very diverse workplace. It's a question, or it's a subject that we talk about frequently, and everybody wants to know, what's your position on this? I've never been opposed to diversity, and I don't think it's as Canadians, we have always valued diversity, but somehow to say that diversity is our strength is a statement that really can't be supported by logic. It's very incoherent. When it comes to a workplace, the thing that matters the most is the person qualified. I don't care if I'm the only male in a workplace that is all female. I don't care if it's all from one part of the world or the other part of the world. What matters to me is, can you do the job? When it comes to the Winnipeg Jets, they don't ask the question, how many Asians do you have working here on the ice, or how many women do you have? Matters to us if we want a winning team is, can you do the job? The People's Party of Canada has four pillars. We have excuse me, just for a second, freedom of the individual, respect. We believe in the intrinsic wealth of every single human being, no matter where you come from. And we believe that as Canadians, we should be showing that respect. But to somehow have this manufactured idea that you have to have some kind of diversity, some kind of racial quotas is just nonsensical.
Thank you, Wayne. Janine.
Thank you. As I spoke to earlier, I think identifying, assisting people in the immigration process with identifying their skills and what supports they need to most accurately express those skills will continue to support diversity in the workplace. I know in identifying barriers, colleagues and friends with disabilities have said there are still many physical places that are not physically accessible. So we can tap into the many strengths and skills that people with disabilities have by improving access to all workplaces, and to not just physical access, but also access to language supports, access to education supports. As I say, Green Party policy includes free education. So I think that would support diversity in the workforce as well. Safety in the workplace. We know that there are many jobs that have repetitive stress injuries and that cause post-traumatic stress disorders. So by increasing the diversity in our workplaces, we can share the responsibilities and identify people with strengths to be in key areas that have the skills necessary to handle the stress of those positions, and that there are supports in place to help people deal with the stresses of their positions. I'm very tired of hearing health workers say that serving as nurses is actually detrimental to their health. So I believe that with support, adequate funding for our healthcare system, that we can continue to embrace diversity within the healthcare system, but make it a more resilient environment where the health of the people working in it is respected as much as the patient care that's being given. I just don't like to see patient care at the expense of workers' care. And this is a very important topic because we will have increased climate refugees, and we need to support this diversity in all of these manners. Thank you.
Thanks, Janine. Trevor.
Another great question: how to enhance diversity in our workforce and economy. We will start out by not calling asylum seekers illegal when they are not illegal people.
Yes.
There are many different ways that both immigrants and refugees enter the country. There are different streams, and some people coming in as asylum seekers does not cause a backlog in a completely separate stream the way that immigrants enter the country. It's just not true. That is a falsehood. I've also noticed that Ted Faulk talks about certain kinds of diversity and not other kinds of diversity. And the Liberal Party will support all types of diversity in this riding, all
Yes.
types of family structures. I was in touch with one constituent who shared with me she was grieving the loss of a friend who took their own life. This was an LGBTQ person in our community who suffered from isolation and a lack of support. In the Liberal Party platform, there is funding for LGBTQ community groups that literally save lives. When these groups do the work that they do in communities and connect people and help people to feel less isolated, it saves lives, and it saves workers' lives. Also, our plan for national pharmacare will support diversity in the workplace. There are a lot of workers that struggle when they can't afford their medications, and that affects their ability to work. They are forced to take time off. That affects their employers as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Trevor. The next question deals with voting reform. And Wayne, you'll take the lead on this one, followed by Janine, and then Trevor, and then Ted. Declining voter turnout and a feeling that votes aren't meaningful. are concerns for many Canadians. What type of voting reform, if any, would you support and put forth?
Well, as I said in my opening remarks, I've been passionate about politics just about my entire life. And of course, I have witnessed the decline in participation. Some years or some election cycles, you see a greater turnout to the polls. But all too often, you keep hearing the same remarks, whether people are voting or not voting. And it always boils down to, the same kind of things. Oh, you can't trust politicians. They're all the same. What difference does my vote make? People are becoming less and less engaged. And for some reason, we have bought into the idea that, whether it's at family gatherings or around a coffee, at a coffee shop or in the workplace, you're not allowed to talk about politics. There's a lot of things that matter to us. There's a lot of things that we kind of get excited about. We get excited about our football team, our hockey team. We get excited about a lot of different things. But, the number one thing that affects every single aspect of your life is politics. Who's in government? What are their policies? To see so many people not bothering to even find out, not bothering to phone the candidate, or not bothering to read the newspaper, whatever the case may be. And we have so much access through the internet to websites and other means of communication to find out exactly what the candidates are saying and how they intend to represent you. And then holding politicians accountable. 4 years ago, you promised this. How come 4 years later, nothing has been done? Nothing has changed. I'm far more concerned about the apathy of voting than I am about some kind of voter reform, because until we get that fixed, no matter what you do, we're never going to have some significant change and significant improvement.
Thank you, Wayne. Janine.
Janine?
Yes.
Is that okay? Now you said it. Great, thank you. I believe that a shift to proportional representation, as Green policy reflects, would address the voter apathy issue that we're dealing with in Canada. I was very pleased to hear that the advanced polls had a very good turnout here, and I hope that that speaks to more people being involved and knowing that democracy is participatory, and we need to educate ourselves and find out what the party's policies are. I mean, 6 months ago, if you'd looked on all our various websites, the Green Party was the only party that had a published policy that you could read about what we proposed and how we proposed to pay for it. And I think our leader, Elizabeth May, has done a great job in showing the respectful behavior towards other MPs that I believe is necessary in this time. Greens don't sling mud, we're into soil conservation. So I believe that all of us are smarter than one of us, and with that, if you look at Canadian history, many important changes, like our wonderful medical system, Medicare system, was developed by a minority government where they were forced to work as a coalition. So when we step aside from the bipartisan thinking that I think is destroying Ottawa in a lot of ways, and try and seek the areas where we share, where our values overlap, to solve problems more effectively, that we would then be able to build the coalitions that can make the kind of change that will have our democracy reinvigorated, and especially the young people engaged in voting, understanding how this opportunity to participate really reflects on the policies that govern our everyday lives. So we definitely support proportional representation. Thank you.
Thanks, Janine. Trevor.
Great question. I want to address something that Wayne brought up about people not bothering to phone a candidate or not bothering to get in touch. Well, that's a two-way street. Candidates and politicians also need to be responsive. We need to be willing and able to talk to our constituents. And that's part of why in my opening statement, I talked so much about what I've heard from constituents, because I really, really deeply appreciate those conversations that I'm able to have. I appreciate being able to listen. I am personally in favor of a change to proportional representation, but I realize how incredibly difficult it is to get that done. I was a student at UBC studying political science just after BC had tried to bring in electoral reform. And actually one of my poli-sci professors, he was tasked with educating the Citizens Assembly, and he taught them every weekend for several months and got them to a point where they made a recommendation, and then it failed in BC. And it failed because of a lack of education. People did not understand what they were supposed to be voting about. People just didn't get it. And it's one of the most difficult things to change in a government. It's incredibly difficult to find a consensus on which type of proportional representation to change to. A lot of people can agree that we need some sort of change, but what the Liberal Party found is that holding those public forums, there was no consensus on what change to make. And it's just incredibly difficult to get it done. So it would be wonderful, and I would certainly support it, but I also get how hard it is to do it.
Thanks, Trevor. Ted?
Thank you, Daryl. I'm encouraged when I hear on the news that there's been a 30% increase in people attending advance polls and putting their X on a ballot. To me, the numbers are going up. I think there's a greater degree of engagement among people than there has been in many, many years. And I find that extremely encouraging. And that's something that I've noticed as I've traveled throughout the riding and visited various school groups. I cannot believe the enthusiasm that some of the students are showing towards politics, towards becoming involved and engaged. When I was in one of the elementary schools some months back, we did a mock parliament, and it was interesting. We gathered all the grade 4 classes together and we divided them up into 2 groups, and one was the government and one was the opposition. And I couldn't believe how these grade 4 students were engaged. And I think we've got a new crop of Canadians that are being raised up that are going to be very politically engaged, politically active. I don't think any form of government is perfect. Democracy is messy, it's dirty. I read today that it's nasty. And boy, I don't know. Have any of you experienced that? I thought it was nasty 4 years ago, but now apparently it's nastier now that they're losing. And so that's pretty interesting to me. But at the end of the day, I don't think there's anybody in this room that would want any other form of government other than the democracy that we enjoy here today. And I'm thrilled to be part of it. And I'm glad that you're all participating as well, and that you're interested in knowing what your candidates stand for, what they represent, and then making informed choices.
Thank you, Ted. The next question deals with agriculture. Janine, you'll take the lead on this, followed by Trevor, then Ted, and then Wayne.
Yes.
Given the size of the agricultural industry in Provencher and its spin-off to other economic drivers, how would you further such an integral industry in our region through policies and initiatives?
Thank you very much. That is also an excellent question. I come from a farm family. I know how important food production is. It's been my primary business as an organic inspector and consultant supporting more resilient agriculture for the last 26 years, that I've really seen that the research shows that the net return per acre is greater in organic agriculture. So it's not for everyone, and we wouldn't expect it to be. But I think we have to shift away from the greenhouse gas polluting synthetic fertilizers and look at how we can maintain and increase our yields in times of intense weather events by looking at the many different aspects of resilient agriculture that can be practiced and are being practiced with demonstrated yield success when you look at the 30-year mark. You can't just look at short term. You have to look at, and this science has been replicated, that over the 30 years, organic yields are equal to chemical agriculture, in that in times of great drought and stress, the soil that has been recharged and is full of life is able to sustain the plants in the very challenging conditions that I think will only be increasing. I think the climate change that we're facing will put even more emphasis on agriculture, and we need to be looking at how we can preserve our soils, prevent soil loss, preserve the microbiology in the soil so that we are able to prevent diseases, as so often happens in organic production and more resilient agriculture. We don't seem to have the same kind of disease and insect pressures because of preserving the whole bioregion. When we have to look at things systemically in the watersheds, and this can really shift our agriculture to electric vehicles and electric management at the small farm scale, rather than so much emphasis on industrial models. Thank you.
Thanks, Janine. Trevor.
Thanks for the question. So I think that through good land management, farming can enhance environmental protections. We can see that through good farming practices where our land ends up acting as a carbon sink. And I think that we can encourage more of that. I don't think we need to set things up as agriculture versus the economy or agriculture versus the environment. I think these things can work together. We have some ecological goods and services programs, but I think they could be strengthened so that farmers could have better access to them. And under the Harper government, our business risk management programs were weakened. Those need to be enhanced again, especially as farmers are suffering from more and more climate extremes. For the past 2 years, our riding has suffered from extreme drought. It was just about impossible to make hay for a lot of people. And now we're having a giant flood. We're in the middle of a flood right at this moment. The floodway has been opened for the first time ever in the fall. So we are seeing climate extremes right now, and farmers are suffering from these. Farmers see these firsthand. There are a lot of crops on the fields right now that farmers are not going to be able to get off their fields. And we need to recognize that. We need to be compensating farmers properly because their risks are going up and they're continuing to go up. And we need good science and good information to support farmers dealing with this. Thank you.
Yes.
Thanks, Trevor. Ted.
Provencher has the largest concentration of supply managed farms in Manitoba. Supply managed farms are farms that are either dairy or poultry nature. It's a proven system. It's a system that works. The Conservatives support supply management. Doesn't require any tax dollars. It sustains itself. It's self-regulating, provides the highest food quality and safety worldwide. We also have a high concentration of hogs, and we have a high concentration of grain farmers in Provencher. We are an agriculture-based riding. We need to recognize that. We need to celebrate that. We need to encourage our farming industry. And we have many, many successful farmers. What our farmers need is market access. Right now, we're in a situation where our farmers can't ship their canola to China. Our hog producers, our hog processors can't ship any hog into China. Why is that? Because of Justin Trudeau's failures. He's failed to have relationships with China that allow our products to continue to be sold into that area. We also don't have an ambassador in China right now. He's failed to reappoint an ambassador after the one that he appointed was a miserable failure and did us more damage than good. And the Conservative Party recognizes that market access is what farmers need more than anything. During our previous 10 years as a government, we entered into over 50 free trade agreements, international free trade agreements that allowed our farmers to sell their produce worldwide because Canadian farmers are recognized around the globe for the quality products that we produce. There's high demand for Canadian farm products. And what we need to do is create market access for them. And when we've got a prime minister, which we will have in Andrew Scheer in just over a week, he's going to be out there trumpeting our farmers and making sure that they have market access.
Thanks, Ted. Wayne.
Well, one thing I'm smart enough to realize is when I'm not an expert in a particular area, and I've never lived on a farm, I've never been engaged in farming. Like a lot of people, though, in the summertime and in the fall, you just can't help but admire the golden fields, the green fields, depending on the season. And I mean, it's a thing of great beauty, so much so that many of our calendars often have those kinds of pictures put on them. Now, when it comes to farming, though, when it comes to agriculture, and I'm just going to sort of key off of what Ted said. Ted is talking about access to markets. Well, that's trade. And when it comes to trade, I recognize that the federal government has jurisdiction over that area. But when it comes to agriculture itself, the day-to-day operations, whether you're in livestock farming, whether you're in grain farming, whatever the agriculture is that you're engaged in, that's provincial. And the thing that to me has never made any sense is, why do we have central planning from Ottawa? BC and Alberta and Saskatchewan are not the same thing as Manitoba, and Ontario is very different. We have different products. We raise different kinds of I mean, whether it's fruit or vegetables or grains, we do things differently. Agriculture should remain strictly a provincial jurisdiction. And let the federal government look after the trade. Let the federal government have do what they can in making sure that our goods have access to the markets. Now, one thing that we can do for our people who are engaged in agriculture is start with this from a standpoint of respect. And one of the most disrespectful things that you can say to anybody engaged in agriculture is call them a polluter. We know that farm implements consume a lot of fossil fuels, and that they do contribute to the carbon dioxide. But these are not polluters. If you want to do something, then stop labeling them as polluters.
Thank you, Wayne. Our next question deals with addictions. Trevor, you'll take the lead on this one, followed by Ted, Wayne, and then Janine. Given the growing concern and impacts on our businesses and communities from addictions, what policies would your government implement to combat these issues, such as a national addiction program?
I think we need to look at some of the root causes, and poverty is a big one. This is something that the Liberal government has worked extremely hard to address. And I'm very proud to say that 900,000 Canadians have been lifted up out of poverty in the last few years under Liberal Party programs.
Yes.
We also need to continue to invest in services, in mental health services, in drug addiction programs. And I'm very concerned about the cuts that Andrew Scheer says that he's going to make. Andrew Scheer talks a lot about reducing taxes and goes on about balancing the budget. And I worry that he's going to save money through cutting some of the most important programs that we need to invest in our communities, that we need to deal with issues like drug addictions.
Thank you, Trevor. Ted?
When the Liberals talk about addictions, they talk about facilitating addictions, not rescuing people out of addictions. Under the Liberal government in the last 4 years, supervised injection sites have grown from 1, which was situated in Vancouver, to over 40 spread across Canada, where individuals can buy street drugs. Yeah, you should celebrate that. That's very interesting. Where you can go on the street, you can buy drugs, and you can go shoot them up. And the Liberal government has perpetuated that problem instead of addressing the problem, instead of rescuing people, putting them in rehab programs, instead of freeing them from their addictions and creating poverty through those addictions. The Liberals have perpetuated it, and they've actually inspired people to take their illegal drugs, go to these supervised injection sites where they're watched where they're provided with sterile needles, but the only thing they do for them is call 911 when they OD, instead of providing them with counseling and the help that they really need to be set free from the addictions. A conservative government will work on rehabilitating people. We know that there's an opioid crisis right now, right across Canada. It hasn't really entered into Manitoba. It's been coming in from the west, but it is starting to creep into Manitoba as well. That's something that we're very aware of. We're going to be addressing that. We know that people that are caught in the addiction, and I just want to highlight the good work that organizations like Teen Challenge have been doing. And I've spoken with the director there, Steve Paulson, and the lives that are destroyed through the use of illegal drugs and addictions, and what it takes to set people free from that. It doesn't take giving them facilities where they can continue on with these bad habits.
Thank you, Ted. Wayne?
As a corrections officer, every day I was dealing with inmates. The largest portion of them had some kind of substance abuse issue. That's what contributed to their being incarcerated. When I first went to work as a corrections officer, I had very little understanding, very little knowledge about addictions. I mean, I think we've all had somebody in our family, a friend or somebody that maybe was an alcoholic or addicted to drugs. Maybe it was prescription drugs, maybe it was something illegal, but we've all probably seen something like that. But working in a correctional center, that was a real eye-opener to me. And the one thing that I discovered is how poor of an understanding that all of us have when it comes to addictions. I recognized how poor my understanding was. And so I focused on doing everything that I could to talk to the inmates. And sometimes that's one of the most surprising things that I hear, and it's one of the biggest disappointments. Whether it's the Liberals, Conservatives, it doesn't really matter which political party it is. It's always about spending money instead of just doing the work. You know how much you could learn just by talking to somebody who has struggled with an addiction and learn from them? That's something that I focused on doing. Instead of going to the so-called experts, people who had graduated with degrees. No, I went to the people who were actually struggling. I said, what can we do to help fix this? What can we do? Tell me why you're struggling. Tell me why it's a revolving door for you. And then after they were released, I would go and meet them at Union Gospel Mission or Teen Challenge, and I would follow up with them, and I would do everything that I could to try to help them not to relapse. And when they did relapse, I would be there to make sure that they could recover again. Sometimes the simplest solution is just having people who are willing to do the work.
Thanks, Wayne. Janine?
Thank you. This is a very serious topic, and I feel that the Green Party policy of seeing addiction as a mental health issue and not as a criminal issue is very important. I have to address that those injection centers are saving lives. There are the opiate crisis is a crisis. We don't see it so much here, but they are saving lives. More needs to be done, absolutely. I think the key to addressing addictions issues is prevention, and that is been demonstrated by studies all over the world and practical programs that when you reduce trauma in children, when you ensure that children are in a safe and nurturing environment, that stops addictions from developing, giving families the resources they need to deal with the mental health issues they have, addresses addictions, ensuring that our healthcare system is fair and compassionate to all the workers and the clients is an important aspect of this, and addressing poverty issues is important. Over 85% of the people in jail in Canada today are there because of poverty crimes. So with a guaranteed annual income, then families will have the resources they need to meet their healthcare needs, to get the supports they need. Green Party support for childcare, whether in the home or in groups supporting socialization. I know as someone from a fractured family, those kinds of supports when children are young are very, very important. It allowed me to go back to university and to create a career because of supports in place to deal with addiction and to deal with mental health issues. But if we can prevent the trauma in the children, we will have a measurable decrease in crime and a measurable decrease in addictions, not through punishment, through nurturing and compassion. We are called to love one another. Thank you.
Thanks, Janine. The next question deals with taxation. Ted, you'll take the lead on this, followed by Wayne, then Janine, and then Trevor. What is your position on taxation of the middle class? And how does this relate to entrepreneurship?
We are the one party that believes strongly in the concept that it's time for individuals to get ahead. We think Canadians are overtaxed, and that's why the very first act that Andrew Scheer will do as Prime Minister of Canada will be to repeal the carbon tax. He's also indicated that what we will have is a universal tax cut, and that will affect the lowest income tax bracket. That's going to save an individual about $440 a year. It'll save the average couple about $850 a year. We are going to also see increased contributions for the RESP program when parents are trying to save money for their children's education. The government is going to contribute an additional 50% more than they have been, so that government contribution will go from 20 to 30% on RESPs. We're also going to introduce, again, we see the value in having healthy children. We're going to introduce the fitness tax credit of $1,000 for families, so that if their children are participating in sports, they're going to qualify for a tax credit. We want to give them incentives. We don't want to penalize people. We want to incentivize them for good behavior, or for positive behavior. Mm-hmm. We're also going to have an arts and learning tax credit of $500, so that we want to encourage people to be involved in arts. We want to also encourage further learning. And so there's going to be tax credits available for that. We are a party that believes in minimizing the tax burden for Canadians, whether it's family, whether it's business. We think that money is best left in people's pockets, and they even know better how to spend their money than the government does. That's primarily the difference between a liberal mindset and a conservative mindset. A liberal person believes that government knows best. Big government, big taxes. Conservatives, we believe in people. We think people know best, and we think it's time for people to get ahead.
Thank you, Ted. Wayne.
Well, Ted just kind of made the argument as to why I was a conservative for most of my life, because out of all the political parties, the conservatives always were the most fiscally minded and the party of reducing taxes. I just don't think that they go far enough. And the reason that I was so attracted to the People's Party of Canada was because of the message of Maxime Bernier, our leader. He has been consistent in every time that he's addressing people from coast to coast. He's a strong believer, and I'm a strong believer, that government has intruded into the lives of Canadian citizens at a level that is getting ridiculous, and it's time for government to take a step back. And when they do, that will provide a significant reduction in expenses, therefore lowering taxes. And the thing that I always kind of it always rubs me the wrong way is when they talk about tax credits or returning taxes to us. You're simply admitting that you're taking more money than you ought to, so we're going to give it back to you. Well, in any other aspect of life, they would call that theft, or it would be called something very, very negative, taking advantage, abusing your authority, whatever the case may be. The People's Party of Canada has by far the best tax policy, the fairest tax policy, and when the People's Party of Canada forms government, the first thing that we're going to do is eliminate many of these intrusions into the lives of people, so that we can actually allow you to keep. We're not looking at returning your money. We're looking at allowing you to keep your money in the first place.
Thank you, Wayne. Janine.
The Green Party policy on taxation will support entrepreneurship by shifting taxes away from taxing our labor, away from taxing our hard work, towards taxing pollution and increasing the taxes on big business and the oil and gas industry. Right now, the subsidies that the oil and gas industry receives are shameful in that it is their work that is contributing to these extreme weather events that are causing stress to our farmers, stress to our food production. And the computer models on how hard it's going to increasingly be to produce food really means that we need to look at the tax structure on how our food producers are taxed. We need to give them tax credits for the environmental services they are contributing to when they preserve tree shelter belts, when they preserve their wetlands, when they consciously choose to hold water on their property, that those are environmental benefits that we all share in, and the tax structure needs to shift towards that. Right now, an earthen lagoon in ground is not taxed per square foot, but if you want to compost that manure so that you're not contributing to water quality issues and eutrophication of our beautiful lakes and rivers, you're taxed on the square foot of your composting pad. So we need to look at what we want to support in agriculture and shift the taxes away from the burdening the production in ways that stop the environmental benefits that we all enjoy, or even if we're not conscious of what they are. There's a lot of education involved to know that how you approach your food production really affects a lot in your community, not just in your own health, but the health of the world in terms of this climate change that's happening. And our taxation structure can address this and give us the funds we need to shift to a greener economy.
Thanks, Janine. Trevor.
The Liberal government cut middle-class taxes from 22% to 20.5%. And we accomplished that by increasing taxes on people earning over $200,000 a year. I think this is incredibly important. Taxes are a way to redistribute wealth in a way that is fair. The tax credits that Ted is talking about are boutique tax credits. They are available to people who already have money. So if you already have $1,000 to spend on your kids' piano lessons, then yeah, maybe you can get $75 back in a tax credit under the Conservative program. And that's wonderful. But what the Liberal Party did instead was to use the Canada Child Benefit to redistribute a lot of money, thousands of dollars, back to Canadian families with children. Another example is when Ted talked about increases to the RESP. Again, that's only something that you can put money into if you have the money in the first place. So if you are already an upper middle class or wealthy Canadian, you can put money into an RESP, and yeah, the government will contribute as well, which is fantastic that we have that. But it doesn't help. It doesn't help most Canadians very much. So what the Liberal government did in the past 4 years was to increase the Canada Student Grants Program by 50%. So for low-income students, grants increased from $2,000 to $3,000 per year. For middle-income students, the grants increased from $800 to $1,200 per year. And we plan to do it again. We will increase Canada Student Grants again.
Thanks, Trevor. Come up to our last question before we'll go to closing statements. And this one talks about issues of the heart and soul. Wayne, you'll take the lead on this one, and then followed by Janine, Trevor, and then Ted. There are many issues facing Canadians today. If you, as the elected candidate, could pick only one to put your heart and soul into for the betterment of Canadians, which would it be?
Well, I don't know how many of you have actually taken the time to read our Canadian Constitution or to think about what the opening words of it says, but it says, whereas Canada is founded upon principles that recognize the supremacy of God and the rule of law. Now, working in a correctional center, gave me kind of a unique perspective on law. Not because I was engaged with people who had broken the law, but it just helped. It helped to reinforce the idea that all of us as Canadians are under a law. And the fact that it says we recognize the supremacy of God says that laws are not arbitrary. Laws are not based on our opinion. We don't take opinion polls across Canada to determine what kind of a law that we should have. We recognize that for a law to be fair, for a law to be protective, for a law to give people confidence, to give them security, that law has to be based on something higher than somebody's opinion, higher than my opinion. If there's one thing that really matters to me more than anything, it's the recognition of our Constitution, because the Constitution is the foundation that our country was built on. It takes a long time to build a foundation. You know, like when you see a house being built, or when you go downtown, you see a new building coming up, you know, it takes a long time for that foundation to get laid. And then as soon as it is, then the building goes up rather quickly. But it just helps to reinforce to me the importance of that foundation and why we need to keep it.
Thank you, Wayne. Janine.
Thank you very much. I have tried to live my values in the choices that I've made throughout my adult life. And I think that reflects my passion for environmental justice. When I have been the most wounded and most needed to turn for guidance, I walk in the forest. And being close to nature has healed me many, many times. And because of that, I strive to treat our food producers with as much respect as I possibly can. I think many people in our culture don't understand the challenges in food production and the amount of hard work and love and sweat and tears and soul that goes into maintaining a family farm. So I have done my very best to put my energy towards maintaining the family farm, towards supporting an honest return for the investment, towards supporting a higher net return per acre, so that more people have the strength and the health that comes from growing up in a rural community on a thriving family farm. So I will continue to support more resilient agriculture. I'll continue to support respect for local food production and encourage local food production and sustainability in food production, so that we are not dependent on food coming from thousands of miles away, that with any kind of transportation disruption, the kind of event that just happened in our communities this past weekend, that we are more resilient in our ability to care for one another and care for this earth that we've been blessed to walk on. I consider life a complete miracle, and I try and give my thanks for my gratitude for being here every day in as many ways as I can. And that's by working with farmers, by sharing what education I have, and by being tireless in finding the answers that they need to solve their production questions. So I will continue to work for environmental justice, and I'm very grateful that the Green Party has such strong policies on food production. Thank you.
Thanks, Janine. Trevor.
Well, this is an impossible question. I'm really glad that Janine has covered environment. That's very important for me too. But on this one, I'm going to go with national pharmacare. The Liberal Party, the NDP, and the Green Party all have national pharmacare in our platforms. I can't understand why the Conservative Party does not support national pharmacare, because it would be a fiscally conservative program. Type 1 diabetes is a great example of this. If you think about providing insulin and the tools necessary to manage blood sugars, and you compare the cost of that to the cost of treating a diabetic in crisis in the hospital, or treating some of the health complications like amputation, like dialysis, that can result from uncontrolled high blood sugars for years, it's a no-brainer. Canadians are ready for this, and this is something that I hear a lot when I talk to people at the doors. People want this badly. So it's cost effective, it makes sense, and it would be so compassionate. We need this. I have a friend who couldn't afford his heart medications, and he stopped taking them, and he had a heart attack. So he ended up in a hospital, and he had heart surgery, and he couldn't work, and it affected his family. His family was traumatized. There are children in this province who will say, why can't I have that blood glucose monitor that my friend has? Well, sorry, because it's not covered for you. We need to change that. We need national pharmacare, and it is time, and my heart and soul is absolutely into it. And if elected, I will fight for national pharmacare.
Thank you, Trevor. Ted.
Well, that for me was a very easy question. When I look at our country, the backbone of our country is the family. And if there's anything I'm really passionate about that I would put my heart and soul into, it's the family unit. You know, I'm reminded of a Bible verse that my grandchildren frequently say. It says, the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, faithfulness, and self-control. Then it ends off by saying, against such there's no law. We're lawmakers. So every one of us at this table is aspiring to be a lawmaker. And yet we can't make laws for goodness. We've heard some of the problems attributed to broken homes, to broken families, broken relationships, children being raised in homes that are dysfunctional. My passion for our country is if we can restore the family unit to what it once was. To restore the greatness of our country will require the solid bedrock of a solid family foundation. And if there's something I'm passionate about, it's supporting families, it's supporting marriages, and doing what we can as lawmakers to facilitate healthy homes, healthy families. If we want a successful, thriving country that'll move our grandkids, move our kids into the next generation with success, it's going to take a healthy and growing family. And that's something I'm super passionate about.
Thank you, Tim. I don't know about you, but the time seems to have flown by. Thanks to our candidates for very informed answers. I think you have four very clear choices as you decide whom you're going to vote for. We're now to that point in the evening of closing statements and reverse order from opening statements. So Janine will go first, followed by Wayne, then Ted, and then Trevor. You have 3 minutes each, so it'll be a little bit longer. Janine.
Thank you. Well, we're in the final days of the campaign, and it's vital that our party leaders and ourselves as candidates speak to where we stand on the issues that are facing Canadians, so that you can make an informed choice. The Green Party is very clear about our priorities: real action on climate crisis, social and economic justice, reconciliation with Indigenous peoples, and a stronger democracy. In the event that no one party wins in our Westminster-style parliamentary democracy, it gives all parties an opportunity to participate in discussions about forming a government and deciding what kind of a government that will be. The Green Party will be part of those discussions. Your vote in support of the Green Party holds the other parties accountable to the high standards that we set. Cross-party cooperation is essential, and the hyper-partisanship will be ended. But Greens will not support any party that comes to these discussions without a realistic plan to achieve greenhouse gas emission reductions that meet our commitments. Yes, our family units are very important, and we need to support the family on an individual way. But when your home is flooded by a surprise flash flood, then you need your community. And so we need community supports, that the kind that the Green Party policies address, to support our families, to support our communities in addressing the very real threats to our food production system, to our way of life, that 2 months of drought flooded by record-keeping rainfalls in the fall, which hamper our harvest make. So Green Party policies in addressing our environmental issues also address our economic issues, also address our family health issues, so that we will continue to listen to one another, to continue to take a bipartisan approach where we want to work cooperatively with the Conservatives, we want to work cooperatively with the Liberals and the NDP, with the parties that are present. If it was a proportional representation, if 30% of Canadians voted for a Conservative leader, then there would be 30% of the seats would be Conservative. But if 20 and then the other 20% voted Green, then there would be Green Party members there. And this forces a coalition and a dialogue in our democracy that would enrich it, that would help us address our issues in a longer standing manner, not just short-term, short vision approaches, but the kind of long-term systemic change that will benefit us all and perhaps save our Earth. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Janine. Wayne?
Well, knowing how to begin this and how to end it is going to be a challenge for me because it's going to be very hard to sum up in 3 minutes. But let me just begin by offering you a quote from one of my favorite politicians from the past. He says, "If we could first know where we are and whither we are tending, we could then better judge what to do and how to do it." The reason that I decided to run this year was because I didn't see anything that gave me confidence. Whether it was it didn't matter which political party. As I said, I was a Conservative all my life, but I just don't have the kind of confidence in the present leader that I need to have. Mr. Scheer has gone on the record several times as saying that he is a pragmatic centrist. Now, I don't know if you use terms like left and right on the political spectrum or how you kind of see yourself politically. But the Conservatives were always a party to the right, and when you are now a pragmatic centrist, you have moved from the right to the left, and to me that's dangerous. I sure don't see anything from the Liberal Prime Minister who went on record and he caused a lot of eyebrows to be raised around the world when he said that Canada is now a post-national state. What does he mean by that? Well, he talked about Canada no longer has any core values, any core principles, and that is very troubling to me because I remember the Canada that I grew up in, and I'm very much afraid that Canada is disappearing. Let me read another quote to you from another great politician from the past. Mr. Gladstone said many years ago that it ought to be a part of man's religion to see that his country is well governed. Knowledge of the past is the only foundation we have from which to peer into and measure the future. Expert knowledge, however indispensable, is no substitute for a generous and comprehending outlook upon the human story, with all its sadness and with all its unquenchable hope. My colleague to the left of me used a term that I have absolutely erased from my vocabulary when it comes to politics. He talked about how he was going to fight for something. And now I understand, why people would use that. I used to use that term too, but then I thought, well, who are you fighting? Who's your enemy? I mean, is this Canada? Are we all Canadians? Are we united, or are we so divided that we actually have to start fighting each other? And I have replaced that that particular term with work. My intentions have always been to work for you, to work for Canada, to work for everybody, to work with whoever is willing to work, and to invest in the hard work. We don't need to be spending more money. We don't need more programs. What we need is a return to how this country was built. Hard work, honesty, integrity, and looking out for each other.
Thank you, Wayne. Ted.
Thank you. Thank you, moderators. And I hope for the folks that have been listening online and have been here this evening that they've found this evening to be valuable in understanding a little bit more about the candidates, the parties, and their different approaches and perspectives on different issues. As I've been going door to door throughout the riding over the past couple months, I've been hearing at many doors, you know what, in 2015, I thought I would give Justin Trudeau a try. But what a disappointment. I won't be doing that again. And for me, that's obviously been encouraging as a candidate. But you know what? It's time for a change. I think Canada knows that, Provencher knows that, and we need to get back to having elected officials that govern with integrity and govern honestly and govern for the people. We currently have a prime minister, the only sitting prime minister to ever have been found guilty of a violation of the ethics law. And not only once, he's been found guilty twice. And in this last scandal, when he tried to intervene in a criminal case, the SNC Lavalin, it was an attempt to reward his corporate friends. And then he disciplined two of the people that he had working close to him, two prominent female cabinet ministers who tried to stand up to him. And he disciplined them, and they left the party. Justin Trudeau does one thing, but he says another. And that's something that needs to change. Our Conservative team, under the leadership of Andrew Scheer, has laid out a different vision for Canada, a positive vision. We're focused on making life more affordable for Canadians. We will help all Canadians get ahead while at the same time protecting the environment and protecting our communities. We're going to make life more affordable for everybody. Conservatives will introduce the universal tax credit that I referred to earlier. We'll repeal the carbon tax, and we'll remove the GST from home heating bills. Our environmental plan is full of sensible proposals to protect our environment and to conserve our natural resources for future generations and support Canadians in their efforts so that we and they can be good stewards of the resources that we have been blessed to have. Our plan will also be for a safer Canada, which will crack down on gangs, create gun laws that actually target criminals, and ensure that our police have the resources and the tools to keep our communities and our citizens safe. As I noted at the outset of this meeting, I'm running for re-election because I want to make sure that we leave Canada better off than what we found it. We want to leave a better Canada for our children and our grandchildren. With so many people struggling, it's no longer enough just to get by. It's time for Andrew Scheer and a Conservative government to help Canadians get ahead, and a government that helps you get ahead. It's time for all of us to get ahead.
Thank you, Ted. Trevor.
Well, thank goodness the Conservatives finally put out their platform at the end of the first day of advance polls being open for voting. So now we have some idea where the Conservative Party might plan to make its cuts to services. One thing that the Conservatives have mentioned so far is infrastructure, that there will be cuts to infrastructure spending.
Not true.
Now, what I do appreciate very much about Ted as a politician is his honesty. And I think it's important for voters to be aware of what he has said in the past. He has said in Parliament that his first priority, given a chance, would be abortion legislation. And we need to be aware of that. That's right. Hands off our bodies. So voters have a choice in this election. We can move forward and continue protecting our reproductive health and choices in our own reproductive health. We can choose to move forward on poverty reduction and to continue on the amazing path that we have led these past 4 years. 300,000 kids lifted up out of poverty.
And more than that, too.
Please respect the candidates.
In the past 4 years, we have spent $42 billion on more than 48,000 infrastructure projects. These are projects that are completed or currently going ahead. And that's amazing. So now we can choose between receiving some money back through some tax cuts, and then all of us having to spend piles of money fixing our vehicles because we're driving into potholes all the time. Or we can keep spending on infrastructure and investing in infrastructure. When the Liberal Party took government 4 years ago, Canada was suffering from a serious infrastructure deficit that is being addressed, and we need to be able to keep addressing that deficit and keep going. When I visited the town of Saint-Jean-Baptiste, I heard about their bridge, or lack of bridge. They haven't had a bridge across the river for the past 6 years. And little towns like that cannot afford to fix bridges that they so badly need without federal funding. We need to continue funding in infrastructure. We need investment in our communities, not cuts. If your roof needs new shingles, you got to fix it before you have water damage in your walls.
Thank you.
Thanks again, everybody, for coming, for participating, and listening to the candidates. Thank you very much, candidates, for all your points of view and sharing and getting your points out there. There's lots of there are people who are more passionate and less passionate about politics, but politics does affect all of us, and the need to go out and vote is a responsibility of every single one of us, whether you care lots about politics or you couldn't barely be bothered with it. So please do go out and vote. Talk about what you heard here today with your friends and relatives and share your point of view and ask them about their point of view. Move that discussion forward and make sure that they care about going out and voting as well, because that's the most important part of all of this. So thank you for coming and participating. Thanks again to the candidates, and drive safely.